The jungle of Primal 13 burned. Emerald canopies that had stood for 10,000 years melted to ash as lancers from orbit carved surgical wounds through the Death World's flesh. Through swirling smoke and crackling vegetation, the silhouettes of Valkyrie transports descended, their engines howling against the thunderous roar that echoed across the valley. Captain Alvara of the 53rd Vostroyan Regiment gripped the overhead rail as her transport bucked violently in the thermal updrafts. Her crimson greatcoat whipped around her legs, gold braid flashing in the strobing emergency lumens. Through the viewport, she watched the primary landing zone dissolve into chaos. 3 of her forward platoons, their red uniforms bright against the jungle floor, scattered as something massive moved through the tree line. Not the lumbering advance of orcs, nor the sinuous hunting patterns of tyranids. This was something primal, ancient, singular, throne of terror, whispered her Vox officer, face pressed to the glass. It cannot be that large. The beast erupted from the canopy, a mountain of muscle and fury twice the height of a sentinel walker. Its hide was midnight black, scarred with the history of countless battles. Eyes like burning coals fixed on the nearest Valkyrie, intelligence and rage commingled in a gaze no mere animal should possess. The colonists called it Kong. The planetary governor called it an obstacle to imperial tithes. The Mechanicus called it biological archaeotech of the highest value. Alvara called it her target. All units, weapons free, she voxed, drawing her power sword. Its blue energy field hummed to life, casting her aquiline features in ghostly light. Trooper Karskin, what does the Feral Worlder Guide say about this creature? The translator beside her swallowed hard. The tribals claim it is the last of its kind, a god-king from before their ancestors made planetfall 3 millennia ago. They worship it as protector and punisher both. Then they Adenites, worship false idols, Alvara said, making the sign of the Aquila. The Emperor protects, not monsters. Pilot, bring us around for deployment. I want heavy weapons teams on that ridge within 3 minutes. The Valkyrie banked hard, presenting Alvara with a panoramic view of the unfolding massacre. Kong moved with impossible speed for a creature of such mass, each stride covering 50 meters. He snatched a Valkyrie from the air, studied it for a terrible moment, then crushed the cockpit between massive fingers. The transport's Prometheum tanks ignited, bathing the beast in orange flame that seemed not to harm him, but only to illuminate his terrible majesty. The remaining transports touched down, disgorging red-coated Vostroyans who formed firing lines with mechanical precision. Lasguns flashed, hundreds of ruby beams converging on the Colossus. Where they struck, fur smoldered and skin blackened, but the creature showed no sign of slowing. Instead, he beat his chest with fists the size of chimera transports, the sound reverberating through the valley like artillery fire. The colonists call that his war cry, the translator said, trembling. When the Mountain King beats his chest, death follows. Alvara's Valkyrie touched down half a kilometer from the battle zone, and she leapt onto the mossy ground, her command squad forming around her. Through magnoculars, she observed the Titan's methodical destruction of her forward elements, not mindless rage, she noted with professional detachment. Tactical prioritization. The beast targeted heavy weapons first, then command elements, then supply lines. It thinks, she muttered. Emperor save us, the Xenos thinks. Not Xenos, Captain, came a metallic voice behind her. Magos Explorator Vor of the Adeptus Mechanicus glided forward on hissing mechanical limbs, his red robes pristine despite the humid jungle. Mechadendrites writhed around his hunched form, Auspex devices sampling the air. Our carbon dating of shed fur samples indicates the specimen predates human settlement. It is native fauna, technically classified as abhuman if its cognitive capacity is confirmed, Alvara spat. It is killing my men, Magos. Its classification matters little to the dead. On the contrary, Captain. Optical augmetics word as Vor focused on the distant battle. Classification determines its value to the Omnissiah. This specimen represents a unique biological engine, perfectly adapted to a death world environment over millions of years of evolution. The Adeptus Mechanicus requires it intact. The Emperor requires this world's tithe, Alvara countered, watching as Kong uprooted a massive tree and swept it through a platoon of her soldiers. The colonists cannot mine with that thing hunting them. They cannot establish promethium refineries while living in fear. Vor's voice took on the cold tone of pure logic. The colonists worship the beast as a god. They have adapted their existence around its dominion. Only the Munitorum demands they change their ways. Before Alvara could respond, her Vox officer called out, "Captain, heavy weapons platoon, 4 reports ready position on Ridge Alpha. Lascanon teams have firing solutions." She turned from the Magos. "Tell them to target the creature's eyes and joints. Maximum power." The Lascanons fired in perfect synchronicity, 6 blinding beams converging on Kong's massive form. The Titan roared as the energy weapons seared his flesh, burning deep furrows across his chest and shoulder. He dropped to all fours, his massive fists pounding the earth, sending shockwaves through the jungle floor. Trees toppled, men fell, and then he charged, not toward the Lascanon teams, not toward the nearest infantry, but directly toward the command position where Alvara stood. 2 kilometers of dense jungle lay between them. Kong covered it in less than a minute. "Fall back," Alvara ordered, her voice steady despite the approaching doom. "All units, retrograde to secondary positions." Her command squad opened fire as they retreated, lasgun beams insignificant against the mountain of muscle bearing down on them. Kong swatted aside trees as though they were saplings, each impact sending vibrations through Alvara's boots. The beast's roar hammered her ears, rattling teeth and blurring vision. Magos Vor remained motionless, facing the oncoming Titan, his mechadendrites extended fully, scanning equipment, capturing terabytes of data with each passing second. "Fascinating," he intoned. "Its bioelectric field suggests rudimentary psychic potential, most unexpected." "Move, you machine-loving fool," Alvara shouted, grabbing the Magos' robes. Too late. Kong was upon them, his shadow blotting out the sun as he reared to his full height. His eyes, intelligent and ancient, fixed not on the soldiers, but on the Mechanicus priest. With deliberate precision, one massive hand reached down. Vor raised his mechanical arms in what might have been supplication or scientific curiosity. Omnisire witnessed this communion of biological and technological marvels, he intoned as the massive fingers closed around him. Kong lifted the Magos to eye level, mechadendrites still whirring and scanning. For a moment, beast and priest regarded each other in strange silence. Then Kong squeezed. The crack of ceramite armor and mechanical implants was audible even over the continuing battle. Fluid the color of machine oil sprayed from between massive fingers. When Kong opened his hand again, nothing recognizable as human remained. "Emperor, preserve us," whispered Alvara's Vox officer. The beast turned his attention to the Vostroyan soldiers who had formed a firing line despite their terror. Lasguns flashed, flesh smoldered. Kong bellowed his defiance and charged again. "Carskin," Alvara said to the translator as they sprinted through the underbrush, "tell me everything the colonists know about killing this thing." The young soldier's face was ashen. "That is just it, Captain. In 3,000 years of recorded history, no one has even wounded it significantly. The tribals say its ancestors once ruled a distant island world before the stars changed. They say the Mountain King cannot die." "Everything dies, trooper," Alvara said grimly. "Ready the flamers. If Lasfire cannot penetrate its hide, perhaps Promethium will convince it to retreat." 15 minutes later, as Kong tore through the burning remains of Heavy Weapons Platoon 4, Alvara was forced to reconsider her assertion. The beast strode through walls of flame untouched, his fur singed but his advance unhindered. The regiment's losses mounted. 300 dead, 500, 800, nearly half her force gone in the opening hour of the engagement. Night fell across Primal 13, but the jungle remained illuminated by burning vehicles and smoldering vegetation. Alvara gathered her surviving officers in a makeshift command post 10 kilometers from the primary landing zone. Auspex scans showed Kong had withdrawn to a mountainous region to the north, a labyrinthine network of caves and ravines the colonists called the Skull. "We have confirmation the creature has returned to its territory," reported Major Tannhauser, his face blackened with soot. "Casualties are severe, Captain. 1,200 confirmed dead. 300 missing, most of our armor destroyed." Alvara studied the tactical hololith, where a blinking rune indicated Kong's position. It defended the landing zone, then withdrew rather than pursuing to annihilation, again showing tactical awareness. "It wants us to come to it, to fight on terrain of its choosing." "We should withdraw to orbit," suggested Commissar Blackwood, unusually subdued after witnessing Kong's rampage. "Request Space Marine support or orbital bombardment." "The Mechanicus has forbidden orbital strikes," Alvara said. "They want the specimen intact, and I will not retreat from a single enemy, no matter its size. We are Vostroyans. We advance." She traced a finger along the hololith. "We will approach the Skull from 3 vectors. Artillery will shell the outer perimeter, driving the beast inward. Sentinel squadrons will probe for weaknesses along these ridgelines. My command squad will lead the main advance through the central ravine." "With respect, Captain, that is suicide," Tannhauser said. Alvara's gaze hardened. "The Emperor asks for our lives daily, Major. Today, he may receive them, but not without purpose." She turned to a hunched figure standing at the periphery of the command tent. "Megos biologis ertan, what have you learned from your colleagues' data?" The Mechanicus adept stepped forward, less ostentatious than Vor had been, her augmetics practical rather than ceremonial. Megos explorator Vor's mechadendrites transmitted significant findings before his termination. The specimen's dermal layer contains unknown fibrous structures that disperse energy, rendering lasfire largely ineffective. However, thermal scans indicate vulnerable points at major joints and the base of the skull. "Can it be killed?" Alvara asked bluntly. "All biological organisms can cease function," Ertan replied. "The question is whether our available weaponry can deliver sufficient trauma to vital systems. I have modified these Hellgun power packs to deliver a more concentrated charge. Theoretical models suggest they may penetrate the creature's defenses." Alvara took one of the offered power packs, feeling its unusual weight. "Distribute these to all special weapons teams. We move in 3 hours." As her officers dispersed to prepare their units, Alvara found herself alone with Commissar Blackwood. The political officer studied her with hollow eyes. "The men whisper that we face a god," he said quietly. "Men often mistake power for divinity," Alvara replied. "That is why we have the Emperor, to show us the difference." Blackwood nodded slowly. "Yet even the Emperor was once flesh and blood, before his ascension. What if this creature represents something similar? A strand of evolution that might have led elsewhere? That is dangerously close to heresy, Commissar." "Merely observation." He gestured toward the jungle. "The colonists have adapted their entire culture around this beast. They leave offerings. They avoid its territory. They have survived 3 millennia in balance with it. Perhaps there is wisdom in their approach." Alvara turned away. "Our orders are to secure this world for increased production. The Xenos fauna is an obstacle to that goal. We will remove it, as is our duty." "As you say, Captain." Blackwood's voice was resigned. "I shall prepare the men for the assault. The Emperor protects." "The Emperor protects," Alvara echoed, but as she gazed toward the distant mountains where Kong had withdrawn, she felt the weight of doubt for the first time in her career. 3 hours later, the 53rd Vostroyan Firstborn advanced toward the Skull in battle formation. Artillery pieces fired from maximum range, their shells arcing high over the jungle canopy to rain down on the rocky heights. Sentinel walkers moved through the trees in pairs, their searchlights cutting through the pre-dawn gloom. Behind them came the infantry, red uniforms now muddy and torn, but their discipline unbroken. Alvara led the central column, power sword drawn and hellgun charged with Ertan's modified pack. The jungle thinned as they approached the mountain, vegetation giving way to black volcanic rock. Steam vented from fissures in the ground, carrying the acrid scent of sulfur. The mountain itself resembled a massive skull only in the broadest sense, its cratered surface and cave openings suggesting eyes and a gaping maw. The tribals say the mountain formed itself in the image of Kong's ancestors. Karskin, translated as their local guide, whispered fearfully. They say it watches over the jungle as he does. Superstitious nonsense, Alvara replied, but she found her eyes drawn to the cave openings, expectant of movement. It came not from the caves, but from behind them. A chorus of screams erupted from the western column, followed by the distinctive crunch of metal being torn apart. Kong had circled behind them, emerging from the jungle to attack their flank. The beast moved with terrifying purpose, targeting the artillery pieces first, ripping them from their emplacements and hurling them into the trees. All units, converge on the western approach, Alvara ordered into her vox. Special weapons, priority targeting. She led her command squad at a run, traversing the rocky terrain toward the sounds of battle. When they crested a ridge overlooking the western slope, Alvara felt her breath catch. Kong stood amid the wreckage of an entire company, bodies and broken equipment scattered around his massive feet. But he was not unscathed. Blood as red as Vostroyan uniforms flowed from wounds on his chest and arms where modified hellguns had found their mark. The beast beat his chest, his roar carrying notes of pain and defiance. Then, with deliberate slowness, he began gathering the bodies of fallen Vostroyans. "What is it doing?" Tannhauser asked, joining Alvara on the ridge. They watched as Kong carried the dead to a flat area near the base of the mountain. There, with unexpected gentleness, he arranged them in rows, displaying what could only be described as reverence. "It is burying our dead," Alvara whispered. "Not burying," corrected Magos Ertan, her auspex devices whirring. Displaying, this behavior corresponds to patterns observed in apex predators marking territory. The specimen is warning us. Whatever Kong's intention, the sight of the beast handling Imperial dead galvanized Alvara's resolve. All special weapons teams target the creature's wounds. Sentinel squadrons, flanking positions. For the Emperor, the attack was swift and coordinated. Modified hellguns fired in concert, their supercharged beams striking Kong's already wounded flesh. The beast roared, staggering as the energy weapons burned deeper than before. Sentinel walkers circled, their multi-lasers adding to the barrage while staying beyond reach of those massive hands. Kong retreated toward the mountain, each step leaving craters in the volcanic rock. Blood flowed freely now from a dozen wounds, yet his movements showed no significant reduction in strength or speed. He reached the largest cave opening and vanished inside. "We have him cornered," Tannhauser said. "Shall we advance?" Alvara studied the cave mouth, her tactical instincts screaming warning. "Number, that is what it wants. The tunnels would neutralize our numerical advantage and limit our fields of fire." She turned to Ertan. "Can your auspex penetrate the mountain?" The Magos extended her mechadendrites, sensors probing the black rock. "Partially. I detect extensive tunnel networks throughout the formation. Multiple heat signatures suggest geothermal features. And something else." "The beast?" "Number. Different thermal profiles. Smaller entities. Hundreds of them, moving in the deeper chambers." Alvara felt cold dread settle in her stomach. Kong is not alone. "That contradicts all colonial records," Karskin protested. "The tribals insist he is the last of his kind." "The last of his kind, perhaps," Alvara said, "but not necessarily alone." She made her decision. "We will not enter the mountain. Instead, we will establish a perimeter and request additional forces. Magos Ertan, can you develop more effective munitions based on our engagement data?" The tech priest's optical units blinked. "Affirmative." The modified Hellguns proved moderately successful. With proper resources, I can design more specialized weaponry. Do so. Alvara turned to her Vox officer. Send word to the fleet. We require reinforcements and heavy armor. And inform them that the situation is more complex than initially reported. As night fell again, the surviving Vostroyans established a defensive perimeter around the mountain's base. Searchlights swept the cave entrances, while snipers maintained vigilance from elevated positions. Alvara used the respite to assess their losses and plan their next move. The casualty figures were grim. Of her original 2,000 troops, barely 800 remained combat effective. Most of their heavy equipment was destroyed, and ammunition for the modified Hellguns was running critically low. Our position is untenable, Captain, Tannhauser reported in the command tent. If the beast launches another attack before reinforcements arrive, I cannot guarantee we will repel it. Then we must ensure it does not attack, Alvara replied. She turned to Karskin and the tribal guide. Ask him how the colonists have avoided Kong's wrath for 3 millennia. The translator conferred with the native, their conversation animated. Finally, Karskin turned back to Alvara, his expression troubled. They leave offerings, he said, livestock mainly, but also... He hesitated. Speak freely, trooper. Human sacrifices, Captain. Criminals, usually. Sometimes volunteers who believe joining the Mountain King brings honor to their bloodline. Alvara's face hardened. Heresy upon heresy. Perhaps, said Commissar Blackwood, who had been listening silently. Yet it raises an interesting theological question. If this creature predates human settlement and has shown both intelligence and a form of honor toward the dead, what is its status under imperial doctrine? That is not for us to decide. Alvara snapped. Our orders are clear. Our orders were predicated on facing a simple Xenos beast, Blackwood countered. What we have encountered is something more complex. Before the debate could continue, a sentry burst into the tent. Captain, movement at the main cave entrance. Alvara rushed outside, magnoculars raised. Through the darkness, she saw Kong emerge from the mountain, illuminated by the regiment's searchlights. But he was not alone. Smaller creatures, perhaps a quarter of his size but clearly of the same species, flanked him. Dozens of them, with the same midnight fur and burning eyes. Throne of Terror, she breathed. There are more. Juveniles, Magos Ertan observed. Offspring, perhaps, or a subservient caste. This completely alters our understanding of the specimen's ecological role. Kong moved to the front of the group, standing between the smaller creatures and the imperial lines. With deliberate movements, he began gathering stones, piling them to form a crude barrier. The juveniles mimicked his actions, adding to the structure. It is building defenses, Tannhauser said in disbelief. No, Alvara replied, watching the methodical placement of rocks. It is building a boundary, a demarcation line. She lowered her magnoculars. It is proposing terms. The realization sent ripples of unease through the imperial officers. This was not the behavior of a mindless beast or even a cunning predator. This was negotiation. Shall I order the men to fire, Captain? Tannhauser asked. Alvara hesitated, the weight of imperial doctrine warring with tactical reality. They were outnumbered now, facing not just one titan but an entire clan of the creatures. Their ammunition was limited, their position exposed. Hold fire, she ordered. Let us see what it does. Kong completed his stone boundary, a rough semicircle extending from the mountain's base. Then, with surprising delicacy, he placed something at its center. Through her magnoculars, Alvara recognized the ornate helmet of Magos Vor, carefully positioned atop the stones. A warning, Blackwood murmured, or a trophy. Both, Alvara said, and a message. This is his territory. Cross this line at our peril. The standoff continued through the night, Kong and his clan watching from their side of the boundary while the Vostroyans maintained their vigil. No shots were fired, no advances made. When dawn broke, reinforcements arrived from orbit. 3 Valkyries landed behind the Imperial lines, disgorging not more guardsmen but black-armored figures whose very presence sent a ripple of awe through the regiment. "Deathwatch," Alvara said, recognizing the silver pauldrons bearing the iconography of the Ordo Xenos Chamber militant. Space Marines specialized in eliminating alien threats. Their leader approached Alvara, his ceramite armor making him tower over the guard officer. He removed his helmet, revealing a face as pale as death, with augmetic eyes that glowed a dull red. "Captain Alvara," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "I am Watch Captain Voss of the Death Watch. We received your astropathic distress call and the Magos Biologis's data packet. The situation here has been deemed of special interest to the Ordo Xenos." "Watch Captain," Alvara saluted. "Your arrival is most welcome. The Xenos presents an unprecedented threat." Voss studied the stone boundary and the creatures beyond it. "Not Xenos, Captain. According to the Mechanicus data, these creatures are technically classified as ancient Terran fauna transplanted to this world in the dark age of technology. They are subhuman at most, though their intelligence presents complications. Complications that can be resolved with bolter fire," suggested one of the other Marines, a massive figure bearing the heraldry of the Space Wolves beneath his Deathwatch pauldron. "Perhaps," Voss replied, "but my orders are more nuanced. The Adeptus Mechanicus has expressed significant interest in studying these creatures alive. The Ordo Xenos wishes to understand how they have remained hidden for so long." Alvara frowned. "Hidden? The colonists have known of Kong for millennia." "Known of one," Voss corrected. "Not of a breeding population. That information never reached Imperial records." His augmetic eyes narrowed, which suggests either extreme isolation or deliberate concealment. The implication hung heavy in the air. If the colonists had intentionally withheld information about Kong's clan, they had committed a serious offense against the Imperium. "What are your orders, Watch Captain?" Alvara asked. "Containment, for now. My kill team will establish a quarantine perimeter. The Mechanicus is sending a research vessel with specialized equipment. Until then, we maintain the status quo." Alvara gestured toward the stone boundary. "And if they cross the line?" Voss's expression hardened. "Then we demonstrate why the Death Watch is feared across the galaxy." The next 3 days passed in uneasy quiet. The Death Watch established weapons emplacements around the Imperial perimeter, their heavy bolters and plasma cannons positioned for maximum coverage. Kong and his clan remained near the mountain, occasionally visible at cave entrances but never crossing the boundary they had created. On the 4th day, a Mechanicus explorator vessel entered orbit. Magos Biologis Ertan received encrypted transmissions that visibly excited her augmetic systems, causing her mechadendrites to twitch and whir. "Most auspicious news," she informed Alvara and Voss in the command center. "Archmagos Genitor Helix is personally overseeing this operation. His expertise in xenobiological adaptation is unparalleled within the Mechanicus." "Why would a figure of such prominence concern himself with feral subhumans?" Alvara asked. Ertan's optical units blinked rapidly. "The specimens represent a unique evolutionary branch. Preliminary analysis of Magos Vor's data suggests they possess several adaptations of interest to Imperial science. Enhanced regeneration, rudimentary psychic resistance, extreme longevity. Weapons potential," Voss translated flatly. "Biological templates," Ertan corrected. "The Omnissiah's work encompasses all forms of efficiency." Their discussion was interrupted by the Vox officer. "Captain, Watch Captain, we have movement at the mountain." Multiple signatures emerging from the main cavern. Outside, they found Kong leading his entire clan from the skull. The massive Alpha stood at their fore, with nearly 100 smaller creatures arranged behind him in what could only be described as formation. They carried no weapons, but many held large rocks or tree trunks that could serve as improvised clubs. "Battle positions," Voss ordered, his Deathwatch brothers spreading out along the Imperial line, bolters raised. Kong halted at the stone boundary, his burning gaze fixed not on the space marines but on something above them. Alvara followed his look to see a crimson shuttle descending from the clouds, bearing the cog insignia of the Adeptus Mechanicus. "The Archmagos arrives," Ertan said, her mechanical voice carrying notes of reverence. The shuttle touched down behind the Imperial lines, its landing ramp extending to disgorge a procession of red-robed figures. At their center glided what at first appeared to be a mass of mechanical tentacles and scanning devices, only vaguely recognizable as humanoid. Archmagos Genitor Helix had long ago transcended most physical limitations, his form now more machine than man. "Fascinating," came his synthesized voice, amplified to carry across the clearing. They arranged themselves by size and apparent age, a hierarchical social structure preserved across millennia of isolation. Kong watched the Mechanicus procession with evident wariness, his massive form tensing as Helix approached the Imperial perimeter. The Alpha beat his chest once, the sound reverberating across the volcanic plain, and his clan responded in kind, a thunderous percussion that Alvara felt in her bones. "A warning display," Helix observed, "yet note the restraint. They could have attacked during the night when visibility favored them. Instead, they chose demonstration over aggression." "With respect, Archmagos," Voss interjected, "we cannot attribute human motivations to these creatures, regardless of their apparent intelligence." "Not human motivations, Watch Captain. Rational ones." Helix's mechadendrites extended, Auspex devices scanning the clan. Rationality transcends species. It is the Omnissiah's greatest gift to sentient life. Alvara watched this exchange with growing unease. "Archmagos, my orders from the Departamento Munitorum remain unchanged. This world must be secured for increased production. These creatures represent an obstacle to that goal." "Your orders presumed a single anomalous predator," Helix replied. "What we face is an entirely new classification of abhuman, one with significant scientific and potentially military value." His mechanical gaze shifted to Kong. "Consider the applications. Biological templates for enhanced guard regiments, psychic resistance patterns that might be replicated, regenerative capabilities that could revolutionize field medicine." "You speak of tech heresy," Voss said coldly. "Genetic manipulation is strictly regulated for good reason." "I speak of controlled adaptation, Watch Captain. The Emperor's work continues through the Mechanicus. We seek efficiency in all forms." Helix turned to Alvara. "Captain, I am officially requisitioning this operation under Mechanicus authority. My vessel carries the necessary documentation approved by your superiors in the Munitorum." Before Alvara could respond, movement from the abhuman line caught her attention. Kong had stepped forward, crossing the stone boundary with deliberate slowness. In one massive hand, he held what appeared to be a crude staff fashioned from a tree trunk. Atop it was fixed a human skull, bleached white by time. "Hold fire," Voss ordered as his marines tracked the advancing Titan with their weapons. Kong stopped halfway between the lines, planted the staff in the volcanic soil, then retreated back across the boundary. The message seemed clear even to Alvara's untrained eye, a territorial marker. "A line not to be crossed. Remarkable," Helix intoned. "It understands symbolic communication." "It understands threats," Alvara corrected, "as do we all." She turned to the Archmagos. "What exactly does your requisition entail?" "Capture and controlled study," Helix replied. "We have developed specialized containment technologies based on Magos Vor's data. Stasis fields calibrated to their unique biology. Non-lethal suppression weapons." His mechadendrites writhed with what might have been eagerness. "With your regiment's assistance, we will secure specimens for transport to a Mechanicus research facility." The Space Wolf Deathwatch Marine growled his disapproval. "We should burn them out. A plasma barrage would cleanse those caves to their foundations." "That would be an incalculable waste, Brother Aesir," Helix said, "and contrary to my authority in this matter." Voss stepped forward, his massive form imposing even next to the augmented Archmagos. "My orders come from the Ordo Xenos, Archmagos. If these creatures present a threat to Imperial security, we are authorized to take terminal action regardless of scientific value." The tension between Space Marine and Mechanicus representatives crackled like static. Alvara found herself caught between competing Imperial authorities, each with their own interpretation of duty. She looked back to Kong and his clan, standing sentinel before their mountain home. They had killed her men, yes, but they had also shown restraint, intelligence, even a form of honor toward the dead. "Perhaps," she said carefully, "there is another approach." All eyes turned to her, human and augmetic alike. "The colonists have coexisted with these creatures for 3 millennia, she continued. They developed rituals, boundaries, patterns of mutual avoidance. If our goal is to increase production, might we not simply establish operations away from their territory? The planet is vast. Surely there are other sites suitable for mining and refineries." Helix's mechanical form whirred as he processed her suggestion. "Inefficient, the richest. Mineral deposits are within the volcanic range these creatures inhabit." "More inefficient than a protracted conflict?" Alvara challenged. "My regiment has already suffered severe losses against a single specimen. Now we face an entire clan. Even with Deathwatch support, victory would come at extreme cost." "The captain raises valid strategic concerns," Voss acknowledged. "A war of attrition against these creatures would require resources better deployed against genuine Xenos threats." Helix's optical sensors dimmed momentarily, suggesting deep calculation. "Alternative proposition: we establish a research outpost near the boundary, minimal intrusion into their territory, observational studies rather than capture. Over time, we may develop methods to communicate, negotiate access to specific resources." "Communication with abhumans," the Space Wolf scoffed. "Next you will suggest treating with orcs." "These are not orcs, Brother Aesir," Voss said. "By Mechanicus classification, they are technically ancient Terran fauna. Their status falls into a unique category under Imperial law." The debate might have continued, but a new development silenced all parties. Kong had moved again, this time accompanied by one of the smaller specimens. They approached the skull-topped marker, where Kong gestured with surprising gentleness toward the Imperial lines. The juvenile studied the humans, Space Marines, and Mechanicus adepts with evident curiosity rather than hostility. "Socialization," Helix observed. "It teaches the younger generation about potential threats. Knowledge transmission, cultural development." Kong beat his chest once, not in threat but in what seemed like emphasis. The juvenile copied the gesture, then picked up a stone and placed it carefully at the base of the marker. One by one, other juveniles came forward, each adding a stone to what became a growing cairn. "A ritual," whispered Karskin, the translator. "The tribal guide says this is how they mark sacred boundaries, places not to be violated." Alvara made her decision. "Archmagos, I will support your research outpost proposal, provided it remains on our side of the boundary." "Watch, Captain. I request your kill team remain on station to ensure compliance from both sides. I will inform the Departamento Munitorum that we have established a containment protocol for Xenos fauna that allows modified resource extraction to proceed." Neither Helix nor Voss seemed entirely satisfied, but both recognized the pragmatic nature of the compromise. With the Deathwatch providing security and the Mechanicus gaining their research opportunity, Imperial interests were technically served without the cost of a protracted conflict. "So be it," Helix intoned, his mechadendrites folding back into his robed form. "I shall establish preliminary research protocols. Captain Alvara, I require your regiment to construct defensive emplacements at these coordinates." He transmitted data to her data slate. "Watch, Captain, your kill. Team's presence will ensure the specimens remain within their designated territory." "The Emperor's will be done," Voss replied, though his tone suggested reservation. "Brother Aesir, Establish surveillance positions overlooking all major cave entrances. I want targeting solutions maintained at all times. The uneasy accord held for 3 weeks. The Mechanicus erected a research outpost just beyond the stone boundary, its crimson towers and scanning arrays oriented toward the Skull Mountain. Kong and his clan maintained their vigilance but made no aggressive moves. The surviving Vostroyans constructed a permanent base 2 kilometers from the boundary, their red uniforms now a common sight as they patrolled the perimeter. Alvara found herself increasingly drawn to observing the Abhuman clan. Through magnoculars, she watched their social interactions, their hunting parties, their rituals. They were not mere animals. They communicated through a complex system of vocalizations and gestures. They taught their young. They buried their dead in shallow caves marked with distinctive stone arrangements. You find them fascinating, Commissar Blackwood observed, joining her at her observation post one evening. I find them instructive, she replied carefully. Know your enemy, as the Tactica Imperium teaches. Are they still our enemy? Blackwood asked. Or have they become something else? A problem to be managed, a resource to be studied, a boundary to be respected. Alvara lowered her magnoculars. Careful, Commissar. Such nuanced thinking borders on dangerous territory. The Imperium contains multitudes, Captain. Not everything is solved by bolter fire, despite what our Astartes allies might believe. He gestured toward the Mechanicus outpost. Even the tech priests understand this, in their way. Adaptation, evolution, the changing necessities of survival. Before Alvara could respond, her Vox officer called out, Captain, priority transmission from the Archmagos. She moved quickly to the command center, where a hololithic projection of Helix awaited. The Archmagos's mechanical form seemed even more agitated than usual, his mechadendrites writhing with apparent excitement. Captain Alvara, he began without preamble, our Auspex arrays have detected anomalous energy signatures emanating from deep within the mountain. Patterns consistent with archaeotech activation. Meaning what? Exactly. Meaning, Helix's voice dropped to a mechanical whisper, that there is something beneath that mountain, something ancient. Something that predates not just human settlement of this world, but perhaps humanity itself. Alvara felt a chill despite the jungle heat. Xenos technology? Unknown, but the energy signatures are increasing in both frequency and intensity. The specimens appear to be responding to it. They have begun gathering at the deepest cave entrance. Ritual behavior unlike anything we have observed thus far. I will inform Watch Captain. Voss, Alvara said. I have already done so, Helix replied. His kill team is preparing for potential hostile action. But I require your regiment's support for a more direct intervention. Alvara frowned. The boundary agreement may need to be temporarily suspended in the interests of Imperial security. Helix finished. If Xenos technology of unknown origin has been awakened, the Mechanicus must investigate. The potential threat far outweighs concerns about territorial violations. And if Kong and his clan resist? Helix's optical sensors pulsed. Then regrettably, the Death Watch will do what they were created to do. Within hours, the uneasy peace that had held for weeks collapsed into frantic preparation for conflict. Death Watch Marines checked their weapons with methodical precision, while Mechanicus adepts calibrated scanning equipment. Vostroyan troops moved into supporting positions, their red uniforms spreading out along the boundary line like blood seeping into sand. Kong watched it all from the mouth of the largest cave, his massive form silhouetted against the strange blue luminescence now emanating from deep within the mountain. Behind him, his clan performed what could only be described as prostrations, bowing repeatedly toward the light. Whatever they worship, it is awakening, Voss said, joining Alvara at the forward command post. The watch captain's armor was festooned with additional weaponry, his bolter replaced by a heavy plasma cannon. The Archmagos believes it may be a dormant Xenos entity, perhaps even a Catan shard. The star gods of the Necrons, Alvara had heard the whispered legends. Surely not here, on this unimportant world. The Necrons sleep in tombs across the galaxy, Captain. Many were hidden on worlds specifically chosen for their apparent insignificance. Voss checked his plasma cannon's power cells. If the Archmagos is correct, we face a threat far greater than oversized abhumans. Alvara studied the mountain through it in her magnoculars. The blue light pulsed with increasing regularity, like a heartbeat growing stronger. What does Helix propose? A direct incursion. My kill team will secure the primary cave entrance. Your troops will establish a cordon to prevent any specimens from escaping. The Archmagos and his adepts will proceed to the energy source for containment or destruction, depending on what we find. And Kong? Voss's augmetic eyes glowed in the gathering dusk. If he interferes, he dies, as do any of his kind that stand between us and our objective. The assault began at midnight. Deathwatch Marines led the advance, their black armor melding with the darkness as they crossed the stone boundary. Vostroyan special weapons teams followed, modified hellguns ready. Behind them came Archmagos Helix and a procession of Mechanicus adepts, their red robes illuminated by the scanning devices they carried. Kong's reaction was immediate and unexpected. Rather than charging to meet the intruders, he retreated deeper into the cave, beating his chest in what seemed less a threat than a warning. His clan followed, disappearing into the blue-lit darkness. They flee, Brother Aesir growled, his massive frame tense with anticipation of combat. They withdraw, Voss corrected, tactically, leading us deeper. Or toward whatever awaits us, Alvara added. The Imperial force advanced into the mountain, following a main tunnel that descended at a steep angle. The walls, Alvara noted, were not natural formations. Though weathered by millennia, they showed signs of deliberate construction. Geometric patterns emerged beneath layers of stalactites, and at regular intervals, niches had been carved that might once have held statuary or relics. This mountain was hollowed out by intelligent hands, she observed. Indeed, Helix replied, his mechadendrites sampling the ancient stonework. The patterns suggest non-human origin, pre-imperial, certainly, perhaps even pre-human. The blue light grew, stronger as they descended, pulsing with an almost musical rhythm. Alvara felt it resonating in her chest, a vibration that seemed to bypass her ears and speak directly to her bones. Around her, she noticed the Vostroyan soldiers growing increasingly uneasy, fingers tightening on triggers, eyes darting nervously. "Steady," she commanded. "The Emperor protects." The tunnel eventually opened into a vast underground chamber that stole Alvara's breath. The ceiling soared hundreds of meters above them, supported by columns carved to resemble impossibly tall humanoid figures. The floor was a mosaic of blue crystal that pulsed with inner light, and at the chamber's center stood a structure that defied easy description, a geometric impossibility of intersecting planes and angles that hurt the eye to follow. Kong and his clan had arranged themselves in concentric circles around this structure, all facing inward, all perfectly still, except for a swaying motion that matched the pulsing of the light. They showed no reaction to the Imperial force entering the chamber, their attention fixed entirely on the central anomaly. Necron technology, Voss confirmed, his bolter raised. A dimensional portal, or perhaps a tesseract labyrinth, extremely dangerous, potentially containing entities imprisoned for millions of years. Helix's mechanical form trembled with what might have been fear or excitement. The specimens appear to be in some form of communal trance. Their biosigns indicate elevated neural activity, synchronized across all individuals. They are communing with it, Alvara realized, or perhaps being controlled by it. As if triggered by her words, the central structure began to change. Its angles shifted in ways that should have been physically impossible, planes folding through each other like paper in higher dimensions. The blue light intensified, concentrated, and then projected a humanoid figure composed entirely of light and geometric patterns. "Necron Lord," Voss said grimly, his plasma cannon humming as it charged. Kill team, weapons hot. Wait, Helix commanded, extending his mechadendrites toward the projection. It is not physical, merely a holographic interface of some kind. The light figure regarded them with what might have been curiosity, its faceless head tilting slightly. Then it spoke, not in words but in modulated pulses of light and sound that Alvara felt rather than heard. Kong responded with a series of chest beats and vocalizations, creating a bizarre dialogue between abhuman and ancient Xenos technology. Impossible, Voss whispered. Communication, Helix countered. The specimens have evolved or been engineered to interface with the Necron device. The light figure extended a hand toward Kong, who reached out in return. When their appendages met, a surge of energy coursed through the chamber, causing the crystals in the floor to flare blindingly. Alvara shielded her eyes, and when she looked again, the impossible structure had changed. Its angles now aligned in a more recognizable pattern, forming what appeared to be a gateway. Through it, she glimpsed a landscape of impossible beauty, crystalline spires beneath a sky of shifting colors. A portal, Helix confirmed. To another dimension, or perhaps another point in real space. The Necrons were masters of such technology. Kong turned to face the Imperial forces for the first time since they entered the chamber. His eyes, always intelligent, now burned with blue fire that matched the crystal floor. When he opened his mouth, the sound that emerged was not his familiar roar, but a complex harmonic that shook dust from the ancient ceiling. "What is happening?" Alvara demanded. "Evolution," Helix replied, his mechanical voice carrying notes of awe. "Or perhaps restoration. The specimens appear to have been altered by whoever created this facility. Genetic keys to activate the portal." Kong beat his chest one final time, the sound reverberating through the Bosa chamber like a death knell. Then, with deliberate slowness, he turned and stepped through the portal. His clan followed, one by one, juveniles and adults alike, walking into the impossible gateway until only the light figure remained. It regarded the Imperial forces for a long moment, its featureless face somehow conveying judgment. Then it too stepped backward into the portal, which began to fold in upon itself, angles collapsing, dimensions receding. "Stop them," Voss ordered, raising his plasma cannon. "Destroy the portal." "Negative," Helix countermanded, his mechadendrites physically restraining the Space Marine's weapon. "The energy release could collapse the entire mountain, and we have no idea what might emerge if the portal is destabilized rather than closed." Voss shook off the mechanical tendrils, but hesitated to fire. "The specimens are escaping with Xenos technology of unknown power. My duty is clear." "Your duty is to the Imperium's survival," Helix countered, a principle that sometimes requires restraint as much as aggression. Alvara watched as the portal continued to collapse, the glimpse of the crystal realm beyond growing smaller by the second. Kong stood at its threshold, looking back one final time. Their eyes met across the chamber, human and abhuman, soldier and titan. In that moment, Alvara felt a strange connection, an understanding that transcended species. This was not retreat or surrender, it was migration, evolution, destiny. The portal closed with a sound like a distant bell, leaving the chamber dim and empty. The blue crystals in the floor faded to dull gray, their light extinguished. Kong and his clan were gone, along with whatever Necron technology had lain dormant beneath the mountain for untold millennia. "Target lost," Voss reported, lowering his weapon. "Xenos biological specimens and technology no longer present." "Not lost," Helix corrected. "Transcended. The specimens have undergone a transformation we cannot yet comprehend. They have become something new." His optical sensors studied the now empty center of the chamber. "The Omnissiah works in patterns beyond our full understanding. Adaptation, evolution, ascension." Alvara holstered her hellgun, a strange emptiness settling in her chest. "What do we tell the Munitorum?" "The colonists. The planetary governor?" "The truth," Voss said. filtered through appropriate security protocols. Xenos fauna neutralized. Potential threat contained. World secure for increased production. And Kong? Alvara asked. His clan? Helix's mechanical form seemed to shrink slightly, as if in resignation. Classified as extinct. Their biological samples and the data we collected will provide valuable research material for generations of Mechanicus biologists, but they are not extinct, Alvara pressed. They have gone. Elsewhere. A distinction without meaning for Imperial records, Voss said coldly. They are gone from this world. That is all that matters. Alvara said nothing more, but as they ascended from the mountain's depths, she found herself looking back repeatedly, as if expecting to see massive figures following in the darkness. The mountain felt hollow now, not just physically but spiritually. Whatever presence had dwelled there for millennia had departed, leaving only echoes and memories. 3 days later, as the 53rd Vostroyan prepared to depart Primal 13, Alvara stood at the edge of the landing zone, gazing toward the Skull Mountain. The Mechanicus had established a permanent research outpost at its base, their red-robed adepts crawling over the ancient structure like insects on a corpse. The Death Watch had already departed, their mission officially complete. "You seem troubled, Captain," Commissar Blackwood observed, joining her vigil. "Not troubled," she replied, contemplative. "About?" She gestured toward the mountain. "About what we witnessed. What it means." Blackwood followed her gaze. "It means nothing, according to official reports. A Xenos infestation neutralized, a death world partially tamed, the Emperor's domain secured for exploitation. And if it means more?" The Commissar was silent for a long moment. "Then such meanings are best left unspoken, Captain. The Imperium deals in certainties, not mysteries." He straightened his uniform. "Our transport awaits. New campaigns call us to other worlds, other battles." Alvara nodded, turning away from the mountain. As she boarded the waiting Valkyrie, she caught sight of the tribal guide speaking with Trooper Karskin. The native's gestures were animated, his expression reverent. "What does he say?" she asked the translator. Karskin hesitated before answering. "He says the Mountain King has ascended to join his ancestors among the crystal stars. That one day he will return, leading an army of gods to reclaim his domain." "Superstitious nonsense," Alvara said, but without conviction. "Of course, Captain," Karskin agreed. "Merely primitive mythology." The Valkyrie's engines roared to life, drowning further conversation. As they lifted off, Alvara took one final look at the Skull Mountain through the viewport. For an instant, she thought she saw a flicker of blue light emanating from its depths, a pulse like a heartbeat or a promise. Then it was gone, lost in the emerald canopy of the jungle, reclaiming its territory. In the void above Primal 13, Alvara stood on the observation deck of the troop transport, watching the Death World recede into the distance. A globe of green and black, unremarkable among the countless worlds claimed by humanity, yet she knew that beneath that mundane exterior lay wonders and terrors beyond imperial categorization, a hollow mountain. A gateway to elsewhere, a species transformed. "Captain," her Vox officer called from the doorway. "New deployment orders from Segmentum Command. We are to proceed to the Hydrafa system. Orc activity reported on the mining world of Caraxes Prime." "Acknowledge receipt," she replied. "Inform the regiment we will commence combat drills in 6 hours." As the officer departed, Alvara returned her gaze to the diminishing planet. Kong was gone, along with his clan and whatever ancient technology had awaited them. But as her regiment headed toward new battlefields, new enemies, new deaths in the Emperor's name, she could not shake the feeling that they had not seen the last of the Mountain King. Somewhere beyond the veil of reality, in a realm of crystal and impossible geometry, Kong and his kind were evolving, transforming, becoming something new. And one day, perhaps, they would find their way back to real space. No longer mere abhumans, but something transcendent. Something even the Imperium of Man would struggle to comprehend, let alone contain. The Emperor protects, Alvara reminded herself. But as Primal 13 vanished from view, swallowed by the void, she wondered if even his divine light reached into the dimensions where Kong now walked.